From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights, with your hosts Steve Politti and Rutgers insiders Brian Fonseca and Pat Lenny. Let's start shopping.
All right. Welcome back to the Rant. Thanks for joining us. A little mid-season basketball we've got to talk about here at the midpoint of the Big Ten season. So we'll talk about some football, some developments, some good, some not so good. But let's start with basketball because we're in the basketball season. 6-4 at the Big Ten break. I think anybody would have signed for that. We would have certainly signed for it, given the toughness of the schedule, given the couple of quality wins that are a part of that six. I guess recency bias. One of the four didn't look so great their last game against Iowa. All right, let's start where you want to start, Brian. What do you think about where this team is now after 10 games? And should Rutgers fans feel good about it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you told people this in the preseason, that we'd be entering February and Rutgers would be soundly in the field, as much as they like to worry about and come up with scenarios that they could maybe miss the tournament. Rutgers is going to make the tournament, barring an absolute catastrophe. They're at that point in the tournament discussion. And if Purdue wasn't the wagon that it is, barreling towards becoming one of the greatest teams in Big Ten basketball history, with one of the greatest players in college basketball of the last decade, Rutgers would be in the Big Ten title race. Obviously, the rest of the conference being as tight as it is makes top four projection tough because there's like 7 teams that are within a game of Rutgers. But if they keep playing the way they do with the third most efficient defense in the country, then they'll be fine. They'll be in the top 4, and they'll be competing for a top 4 seed, which would bring Rutgers in the first round to Albany, New York. And if they win 2 games, they'll have the Sweet 16 in Madison Square Garden. Can you imagine that?
I'm still stuck on the barreling toward the biggest Big Ten team of all time. I can't wait till that Purdue team, by the way. And I've watched them. They're good. I can't wait till that Purdue team is sitting there in the second round, life and death against some 10-win SEC team. Like, give me the team I'm looking for.
What about the St. Peter's Peacocks, baby?
It's St. Peter's team. Anyway, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. To your point, though, yes, Rutgers. I see what you're saying about that. I'm going to be the blanket here. I'm going to be the bucket of cold water on this, though. That Iowa game does. When you watch the Iowa game, you've seen them lose that game now twice. You've seen them lose with as great as a defensive team, we call them a great defensive team, leaving the 3-point shot open constantly. Teams hit those shots. I mean, Iowa's not the only team that shoots a bunch of threes and wins games like this. You know, I mean, I've seen this script a bunch of times now where these guys are open, they're hitting them. It's not a fluke. I just wonder if we have found the type of team that is Rutgers' Achilles heel, Pat. I mean, am I sounding the alarms too much?
You're not. You're right. It's a tough matchup across the board. The way Iowa brings the length, they pass the ball really well, and they shoot the ball really well. So you're right. It is a little bit of an Achilles heel when teams can. Forget about the name on the jersey. When a team shoots that well from 3, they're going to win no matter what. It's just the fact of life. So I think that when you run into a team like that in the tournament, it's definitely dangerous. And you're right. It is definitely concerning.
There's only one Iowa in the Big Ten, but there are plenty of teams like that across the country. All right. We're getting ahead of ourselves. I get it. But this week, I guess you could still, a loss on the road to Iowa. Obviously, it didn't hurt Rutgers at all. They dropped from 20 to 21 in the net last time I looked. I don't know if it went down further since then. Brian, you did a good story on the NCAA probability, putting it 99%. I guess now we're looking at seeding. When you look at the final 10 games of this year, what is the most realistic record for this team? What would be the baseline record, and what would be the baseline seed? I mean, you think we're looking right now they are playing in that 6 seed territory, or is it even higher than that?
Yeah, I would say that's probably a good place to realistically aim for. The way that Brad Wachtel, who does a great job with bracketology, the way he put it to me is essentially they're holding serve at home. They have to win their next 5 home games. They have to absolutely beat Minnesota, who stinks. The way that Purdue is one of the greatest, Minnesota is one of the worst. Eddie Jordan territory, they stink.
Wow, Eddie Jordan territory. Who's the coach out there? Who did you just slap the Eddie Jordan?
Ben Johnson. That's probably a bit harsh, to be fair. He's recruiting a lot better than Eddie Jordan, and he looks like he actually coaches rebounding. So maybe I'm being a bit mean. But they're bad. They stink. Rutgers cannot lose to them on Wednesday at all, because if they do, they're dropping from a 5-seed projection to a 7-seed projection. You beat Minnesota twice. You beat Nebraska. You beat the other, borderline Q3 teams in Wisconsin. The other borderline Q3 team in Michigan, who was also having a disaster of a season. You win the games you should, and then if you pull out two wins in these next 3 games against Michigan State at Madison Square Garden, at Illinois, and at Indiana, you win 2 of those 3 games, you're starting to dream about a top 4 seed. And like I mentioned, the aforementioned dream Madison Square Garden scenario. So Rutgers is in good shape now, as long as it doesn't do what it hasn't done all season, which was a big issue last year. If it doesn't lose games to teams it shouldn't. The way they play, the defense they play, gives them a pretty high floor to not do that. I agree with you guys on the 3-point thing. That's kind of just the way college basketball is. Rutgers has gotten a bit unlucky in 3-point shooting against Michigan State. It got unbelievably lucky against Penn State, which is the best 3-point shooting team in the Big Ten, that looked like they couldn't hit a shot if they spent the whole night in the gym for against Rutgers on Tuesday. And then you saw what happened on Saturday against Michigan. They just absolutely blew the doors off them. Penn State did. So sometimes you got to get lucky from 3-point defense. And the issue that I would be more concerned with is that Rutgers just can't keep up offensively in a shootout, because they're not that talented offensively, especially when Cam Spencer is in the slump that he's in. So that's where the alarm bells are ringing in my head. But when it's tournament time, all you really need to do is show up for a month-long stretch. But that's also the gift, the blessing, and the curse of single elimination games in a tournament. I think, as you mentioned before, you could ask Purdue. They're way better than St. Peter's, but all you need to do is show up for one night and you win and you advance.
Sort of fascinating thing about Spencer. So 21 points in the last 3 games. It feels like Big Ten teams have sort of decided he's not going to beat them. Now, that's okay when, I know you wrote a nice story about Andre Hyatt, Pat, who's embraced that 6-man role, who came in and was just in fuego. It's just kind of funny when because I still feel, and this is awful, but I love the kid. Every time he pulls up a shot, I'm like, oh, and I just completely wrong, because he nails them. But that entire game was like, oh, that's right. He is leading this team. So I give him credit for being Andre highlight against Penn State. But yeah, I mean, someone's got to pick up the scoring when Cam Spencer's not doing it. And it's kind of been, he's kind of not been doing it the last 3 games. Yeah,
it's a bit concerning. I think a lot of people feel the way you feel about Andre Hyatt. He catches, he shoots, and everyone kind of holds their breath for a hot second. But maybe that's him learning the role a little bit as a 6-man. Like, you don't have to be this jack the ball up type scorer, but when Rutgers needed him against Penn State, he certainly lived up to the billing and got really hot and blew that door, knocked that door down. Andre Hyatt, Peichel said that he thinks he's one of the best 6 men in the country, which Peichel doesn't talk about his players at all. So for him to say that, I thought was really high praise and something noteworthy.
I will say one thing I do want to say about Andre Hyatt. Everyone else holds their breath. That man has no hesitation.
No, he doesn't. I love it. I respect that. It's great. No, he doesn't care. It's great.
There was one shot he took against Iowa that I don't know if 1% of basketball players in the country would take it, and he took it like he was Steph Curry, wide open, facing the basket head on. It was incredible. So what he has I agree with you guys. His usage rate is very high. He takes a lot of shots when he's on the floor.
Right.
Probably 3 or 4 too many. But goddamn, if he doesn't think everyone is going in, so that's if you're gonna be like that, you need the confidence that he has.
Yeah, and speaking of that confidence too, there was a really good stat in that Penn State game. He was something like 0 for 21 from the floor in the 5 halves before he went on fire against Penn State.
Wow.
So just like as cold as you could possibly be to turning it on and catching fire. So you just hope that one of those big games that Andre Hyatt has one of those fire type games and really picks it up in a spot that maybe Cam Spencer isn't playing well or someone else isn't playing well.
And it might be so dramatic, guys, because the rest of the team is the exact opposite with that. Like, they will not take a shot unless it's like, in the good shot definition of good shot in the book, right? So I guess that's probably part of the reason why we look at it and are so jarred by it. All right, let's look at the last 10. You're right, Brian. I think 6 is certainly a reasonable number, but there's a lot of ifs in there. Like 6 if you beat Michigan, but they never beat Michigan. They've never beaten Michigan, right? So that's a big if. 6 if you win at Penn State. I don't know that's not an easy place to play. Yeah, and then you got at Indiana and at Illinois. Those are the two I think that are the keys here because they're the teams now you're tied with in the standings, the teams you're competing for that double bye, and they're both playing great, right? I mean, just so size this up to me. Where are you? Oh, at Wisconsin, I forgot. That's not exactly an easy place to play either. So, yeah, 6 is tough.
Penn State, tough place to play. First time those two words have ever been uttered, ever.
Well, I mean, looking at them right now, you feel good about that?
A tough place to wrestle.
Is that a toss up? Is that a Rutgers favorite that game?
No, Penn State will be favored. They're when they're shooting the ball as well as they could, when they're not shooting 15% on threes, they're a tough matchup to beat. I agree with you. I would say again, the easy games are easy. Minnesota twice, Nebraska. Those games you should really dominate.
And Northwestern at home. You should beat Northwestern at home. Yes.
Northwestern's good, man. They're good.
But you should beat Northwestern at home. You should beat them. They're not as good as their record.
I agree.
don't think. I beat them on the road. You should beat them at home.
I think they're good. I think you're right also that you should beat Northwestern at home. I just think they're a tier or two above the Nebraska, Minnesota.
Of course, right. But that's your 6-point favorite, not a 16-point favorite in that game.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say the best opportunity they have at getting a big win, not necessarily a needle-moving win, but a win that really would help their resume is against Michigan State because it's technically a neutral site game, and they're going to have 5-to-1 ratio of fans in there. I know fans are complaining a lot about the game not being at the rack. They're losing a quote-unquote home court advantage. I still think there's going to be a healthy amount of them there, and they can take advantage of the premier location. And then, listen, Rutgers has had Indiana's number for a long time. Trace Jackson Davis is playing like the second best player in the Big Ten behind Zach Edey. He's just been an absolute monster. That will be a tough game, but if Rutgers can continue that domination, that's a big time win that can help the resume because Illinois is going to be a tough place to win. They've never won there. They got dudes that can make it really tough on Rutgers defense. The absolute minimum, like the absolute bare minimum is 4 wins. And then from there, Michigan, I think is a little softer than you give it because they look like they've quit. And Wisconsin looks horrendous.
And 4 wins, you're still an 8-9 seed at 4 wins.
Yeah, and then you win the 2 other games against Michigan and Wisconsin that you should. You're probably 7-6, and then if you win 2 of those 3 games against Michigan State, Indiana, Illinois, you're in that 4-5 range. So probably a little early to kind of be dialing in on seeds, but I think that's kind of what the picture looks like at this point.
Hey, Brian, what determines? Sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
What determines whether you're in the East or West? How does that get sorted out?
The way I understand it is that if you get a top 4 seed, it's quote unquote protected. So they'll do their best to put you in the geographically favorable region that you don't travel as much. And then aside from that, it's really just like they see teams like they do teams like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you kind of just fall into whatever seed line that is. And then they just determine where each team and each seed line goes. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. But if you get a top 4 seed, you're more likely to get a favorable region.
That makes sense.
Talk about easy columns. If they're in a region at the Garden, holy cow, that's going to be home for dinner tonight, honey. Kind of column. That'd be pretty easy.
Like Duke UNC playing in Wilmington every year.
Greensboro, come on. Greensboro's an option. Greensboro could be down in Greensboro. Let me tell you, I'll show you a good time in Greensboro.
Wilmington. What am I saying?
We'll have a blast in the Gate City, which is what Greensboro is called. Okay. All right. Can we move on to true or false? We did enough basketball. I got one basketball topic and all football topics here in the true or false. All right. You guys ready?
Let's go.
I know you are. All right. True or false? Minnesota will give Rutgers a huge scare on Wednesday night. Fonseca, you're not high in Minnesota. True or false?
As much as the elements are going for them, Rutgers was in Iowa until yesterday because of plane issues, and it would just be so Rutgers for Minnesota to go off at the rack. I think they're so bad that you could give them 6 players on the court and they wouldn't win the game. So I will say false.
Okay. Pat?
I will say false as well.
That's totally going to happen. Yeah. That's true.
Oh,
that's going to happen. Come on. That's going to happen. They're not going to lose,
though.
but
that's good, though. And we need a raucous rack or jersey.
It's going to be 29-27 at halftime. All right. True or false? Isaiah Pacheco holds the key for the Chiefs to beat the Eagles in Super Bowl, what is it, 57? 57? Yeah, I think so. 57. True or false? Brian, true or false?
True.
Pat?
The key, false, but big part of it for sure.
Big part of it, man. I tell you, I just love the social media reaction to him running the ball. People just discovered him in a meaningful way in that AFC Championship game. It was wild. He looked great. Good stuff by him. All right, true or false? Nassim Brantley is the big-time receiver this Rutgers offense needed to add through the transfer portal. Western Illinois edition, new receiver, big kid. True or false, Brian?
He is a body. They needed somebody to show up. But if he's the guy, I'll say false for now.
Pat?
I'm going to go true. I think he's got the size and the speed and had a really nice game against Minnesota, which no one on Rutgers had against Minnesota last year. So I'm going to say true.
I'm going to go false. I certainly saw the size, but I did not see the speed. We'll talk about that in a minute. All right. True or false? Anthony Johnson's dismissal is a devastating loss for this Rutgers defense. How bad is it, Brian? True or false?
False. It's not devastating. I just think the fact they've had 2 kids dismissed for getting arrested and within a calendar year is a bit of a tough look. Not that they're connected and not that, it should be a huge blemish, but I just don't think it's a great.
Pat?
Linebacker depth was their biggest concern this past year. I know it's a little bit better when you get those 2 guys back from injury, but still, I think it's a loss. So yeah, I'm going to say true. Maybe not devastating, but definitely a loss.
Yeah, the word devastating is a problem. I'll go false that it's devastating, but certainly he would have been a depth chart player. All right, to your point, Brian, Anthony Johnson's dismissal is a sign that Rutgers culture is not working. True or false? Is this a problem? 2 of these in a year? Are you concerned about the culture?
I'll go false. I think they seem to be isolated incidents. We'll look at the reports when we get them and see if it's. But I'll go false. I think it's a bit harsh to indict an entire program over the actions of a couple of players.
Right, Pat?
Yeah, it was very well said.
Yeah, I'll go false too.
False.
And I will give Greg Shan a lot of credit with this stuff. I mean, there is no trying to let's work with it. Let's hide it if it's something that he believes a violation of team rules. The kid's off the team. So, I mean, give him credit that he does not play around with this stuff. This means a lot to him. He believes in culture, and you're seeing it with this kind of action. All right. True or false? Dave Brock is a fine hire for wide receivers coach. Dave Brock, do we like that hire? Fonseca, true or false?
True. I think that's kind of what my exact feelings were when I saw it. It's
fine hire.
It's fine. Yeah.
Pat?
True. Experienced guy. Every hire they've made is all about experience. So I'm going to go true.
All right. For the sake of discussion, I'll go false. Nothing against Dave Brock, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And finally, the next offensive line coach at Rutgers University will be, drum roll, please, will be Kyle J. Flood. True or false? Brian, on the spot. Is this all setting up to bring back Kyle J. Flood? Tell me it is. Go ahead. Say true, Brian. Do it.
Every bone in my body really is praying that it's false. I can't go through that circus. So false.
Pat. Okay.
Let's go true.
You are going true.
Let's go true. Let's talk about
it. Look, all right. So it's not going to happen, but I will say this. If you like, the fans have conspiracy theories, like that this is a media Steve Politi it's in my head conspiracy theory. Wasn't going to talk about it, but it's gone on long enough now that I'm like, all right, so what would be taking so long? And you know that what's the ESPN basketball writer's name and be a guy who did with the fingers pointing up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
Windhorst. Like, I'm doing my own Windhorst here. You can see me at my office. I'm doing my own Windhorst about this. Like, why would it take so why would you hire 2 guys who have worked with Kyle Flood, and then you're going to hire Dave Brock, who he followed Kyle Flood in a couple of places, and you need an offensive line coach, and you need someone with a history of rebuilding an offensive line. I mean, you can't hire Kyle Flood. I get it. That can't happen. But it's still, there had been a moment where I was sitting there, is this really building toward Kyle J. Flood? That'd be something, right? Man.
That would be.
Wow. Why would Kyle Flood get demoted from an offensive coordinator to offensive line and go back to a place where he had one of the most embarrassing scandals?
Okay. That's a great question, but I have the answer to that because he still has a house down the shore. His wife lives still. I mean, I think they still live. I've kept that house. He has not resettled his entire family to Texas. So then it would be coming home. Rutgers is now paying. I mean, they're paying Dave Brock $500,000. I don't know what Kyle Flood makes. Certainly, he's got to be doing pretty well as offensive coordinator at Texas. But it's not like you're coming back here for, $1.25. You're coming back here for some real money.
I don't know what the cost of living is in Texas, but I have to imagine the 1.2 million or whatever he's making at Texas
Yeah.
will go a lot further than the 800,000 or whatever he'll make here.
This is true.
He could buy
Great
3
point.
new shore houses with the Texas money.
These are all great. This is all good counter arguments. It's not going to happen, but still, again, it's just my own little conspiracy theory. They're waiting, and they're going to announce it. They're going to wait until so I'm going to put it out there. I'm on a plane to Arizona for the Super Bowl at 10:42 a.m. on Monday. If this comes out, if this is released at 10:47 on Monday, you know that the Politi conspiracy theory, this is what's happened. All right.
I can't wait to read that 1,200 word column you have in the.
Sorry, I've already written it. I'll just send it from the plane. I'm kidding. Of course not. It's not going to happen, but it's fun to, again, fun to speculate. All right. Dave Brock, here's my only thing about Dave Brock. Extremely experienced guy, worked with receivers. You look at his resume, and Jimmy Gill did a great job putting out the guys he's worked with in the NFL. Give him credit for that. He's a developmental guy. Rutgers needs to develop these players. But my only thought about this is that position, wide receivers coach, is typically a young guy who can relate to the players, who can recruit. And that's not Dave Brock by any stretch of the imagination. So I don't know. I do know, I do strongly believe Rutgers' offensive line problems is a development thing. I still think the receiver problems is a personnel thing. I just don't think they have them in the program, or at least we haven't seen them in the program. Maybe they're bringing new guys in. Maybe this Brantley kid is the key. Maybe there's a guy in the recruiting class they like a lot. I don't know. That's my only thought, was that's a position typically where you want someone who can get players.
Fair point. And you're right. But they went that route with Nunzio and Augie Hoffman, trying to bring in these young guys to relate to kids. And what did that get them?
That's
Nothing.
a great point.
So
a great point.
I think they've learned their lesson there, and they're going to go with the experience route and hope that experience trumps all.
And it seems obvious that Brantley waited to see who was going to be hired there before making the decision to come here as well. So perhaps that's, that he might have already recruited one player for all we know. So we will never speak to Dave Brock. Will we ever speak to Dave Brock? No.
We will. Spring practices. Okay. Excellent. Well, you'll be down there to ask that question.
Speaking of Brantley, Pat talked to a couple of people close to him. I'm curious what his takeaways were from that. What did you think out of talking to those people?
That's why I'm kind of high on him. I mean, I talked to his biggest supporters, which always kind of blurs your perception of someone. But I just think that he got his big chance at, they didn't throw the ball much at Sacred Heart, so he didn't do a whole lot at Sacred Heart. But went to Western Illinois and had this monster season. And I just think that with his size, he looks a lot like Sean Ryan. And I think he can kind of that Rutgers recruited him to fill that role. So my perception is that I think he's going to step in immediately and be at least a starter and contributor, and hopefully be one of the big play guys.
It has to be a starter, right? I mean, who else? Give me the wide receiver depth chart right now.
Chris Long, who had a
decent
year, but outside of that, they lost Sean Ryan, Aaron Cruikshank, and Shamin Jones. So I mean, they lost their three top receivers. And Johnny Langan should be back at tight end, but. And Konopka, but they're really, really desperate for receivers. So he has to be a guy.
Is there anybody at the edge of that roster who we didn't see that's going to be the guy too that's out there?
Todrick loves Fama Toure from Irvington.
Yes, he does love Fama Toure. Right.
So little Kenny Britt, as he's been described many times. We'll see if that lives up to the hype. On the brink, I don't know, Bri. You got anyone?
No, I mean, they got to hope that the 5th year of Isaiah Washington is the one that the light bulb goes off, I guess. Maybe one of those freshman guys, Fama Toure, DeAndre Johnson, who's going to be the tallest wide receiver in college football if he stays at wide receiver. But I think you're good.
And Rashad Rochelle, I could see moving back out of need.
Oh, forget it. No, he's gonna be the Wildcat quarterback for 15 to 20 snaps a game. I'm sorry, I've seen that script. 15 it's going to be 10 in the first game, and by week 10 or 11 it's going to be 25 snaps a game. But anyway, so he's got some shifty moves. He'd be a good slot guy, absolutely. You would think.
I think their best wide receiver is somewhere on another team's roster waiting to enter the portal after spring camp, and they'll pick him up, because I just can't imagine, because if this is all the wide receivers they're rolling into the 23 season with, it's going to be a long year for Kirk Ciarrocca.
All right. This is a good transition. So our first question, insider questions. Let's take some of those. Thank you guys for subscribing to our texting service. Peter in Palm City, Florida. Peter, a loyal reader. This is funny to story about Peter. Peter texted me, emailed me an offensive line prospect. He said, you need to get this kid. This is kid in Florida. You need to get this information to the Rutgers coaching staff that this is a real prospect. I don't have the kid's name in front of me. So I did. I was the middleman here. If this kid this is the next Blindside, whoever this kid, I'm going to write this kid's name. If this happens, if he's on the roster, if he's recruiting class, I'm going to ask Greg Schiano, Greg, how'd you find out about that tackle from Florida? Take some credit for it. Anyway, all right. So Peter from Palm City, Florida wants to know, is it concerning that only addition to our offense is a wide receiver from an 0-11? I didn't realize that. 0-11 subdivision school, not a portal quarterback in sight. Do Greg and Kirk Shiraka know something all of us don't? You talked about it a little bit, Brian. I mean, I guess we're waiting for things to shake out in the spring now. I guess that's the next time we'd see movement. I mean, this can't be it.
Yeah, I have to agree. I would be shocked if this is it. They need at least one more wide receiver, maybe two, at least one tight end, probably an offensive lineman or two, a tackle, a guard. They need a lot of help. I think quarterback of all of them is probably the last position they need to bolster alongside running back, just because, I don't care if Tom Brady's there. He has no one to throw to. Like, who cares who's throwing the ball if there's no targets? So I think they really need to attack the portal there after spring. That's when there's the second portal window that opens for about 15 days. And a lot of players who realize that they don't have a spot on their current depth chart leave. And they always seem to find a guy or two in the summer out of nowhere. That seems to be a Greg Schiano special. So there's still plenty of time, but there's also plenty of need. And I think they really need some help.
Pat, do you think that this is obvious that we're headed to the point they're going to, or are you convinced that maybe they're not going to? I mean, what's your thought?
No, I think they'll add some more after spring. I agree with Brian. I think they'll add some more, but I think that we're heading towards an offense that is very predictable, that it's going to be a run heavy, just like it was at Minnesota last year, and hope that the quarterback and receivers can just make enough plays. So they're not going to be relying on the pass. They're going to be relying on Sam Brown and Kyle Monungai. So I think people need to pump the brakes a little bit on the personnel, because the personnel that they have in place for the offense is there, I think.
Dial back the expectations on the passing game, which is an excellent point. All right. We had a lot of fun questions. We didn't have a lot of questions. We had a lot of fun questions. I love this one from Mike in Maple Shade. It's Empire State Building official. New York City and North Jersey now belong to Philadelphia. And you got an eagle emoji, a green dot emoji, and a boxing glove emoji thrown in here. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. But just for our own humor, would you guys say Rutgers is located in Eagles country or disputed Giants country territory? This is a great question, because at a certain point in my life, anything below like Cranford was South Jersey. Like if you cross the Raritan Bridge, you might as well be in Delaware, where I grew up, in Nutley, North Jersey. So, but I've come, of course, I've evolved a little bit, that I have to think that Piscataway, New Brunswick is disputed Giants territory. Brian, you were there. Do you disagree with this? I mean, you guys, Pat, you were there. What do you think?
I think Pat would have a better grasp on this than me. I've always felt like it was disputed, but I'm not a Giants or Eagles fan, so I never got into any heated debates either way. Pat, what do you think?
My friends group at Rutgers was split 50-50, because half of us were from South Jersey and half were from North Jersey. It wasn't like they were local kids from dead center New Jersey, but I would tend to, if I'm saying people in the city of New Brunswick, getting very technical here, I would say that's still a little bit too north for the Eagles line. Like, I think that's the Burlington County cutoff is the real Eagles territory.
Okay, interesting. All right, that's way down there, right?
Yeah,
Burlington County.
Burlington, yeah.
Another one of those counties that I just assume is way down there, because I don't know exactly where it is. So yeah, okay, Burlington County. That's South Jersey. Ooh. All right, good answer. Appreciate it. So we don't know the answer.
I think Maple Shade is in Burlington County, where Mike is from, who asked the question.
All right, next question, a budget question. In light of your report on Rutgers' athletic budget, what is holding back Rutgers from wiping away the eternal debt athletic owes? I said, it sounded like I said eternal debt. It's actually internal debt Rutgers athletics owes to the university, but eternal seems to work as well. Brian, you did our annual budget story, and as usual, we had like 5 or 6 fans flip out. We put this out there. We're not the only one to write this. I mean, I spent like that week. I read one from UCLA. I read one from Ohio State. I mean, there's all sorts of financials reporting this time of year. Rutgers, give me the quick overview of Rutgers' financial picture right now, and what do you think about the debt question?
I read the Ohio State one. They made record profit or record revenue. I think that's maybe why the Ohio State fans are complaining as much as Rutgers fans, and why they don't think the Columbus Dispatch hates Ohio State like they think we hate Rutgers. Maybe if Rutgers made a little bit of money, people would be like, wow, thank you for writing this beautiful article about Rutgers, Brian.
That's the moment we'll stop writing a story, right, Brian? We would never write a story about them making record profit.
Of course, that would go against our anti-Rutgers agenda. Yeah, I mean, look, it's the 6th year in a row. I think they've broken a record for the most money they've spent on athletics. I don't think that's particularly bad, because they're trying to, one, they're probably underfunding athletics compared to their Big Ten peers in the first place, and they're just trying to catch up. And 2, they're going to receive significantly more funding from the Big Ten now that they've signed this $1 billion deal. I think they made $33 million on media rights this past year. That's going to double by 2024. The issue is they're just not making enough money back, right?
Right. That's the whole problem.
Yep. But I have no issue with the spending, because if you're going to go all in on big time athletics, if you're going to try to compete in the Big Ten, you have to spend this money. The issue is a lot more on the revenue side than the expenditure side, I would say. You have to spend.
We have to spend well. And it is like, why do we report it? Because it's fascinating. I agree. I don't think you shouldn't look at increased spending as a bad thing necessarily. And I did the math on this, and I tweeted it when they hired Shiraka. They were paying Shiraka and Gleason, 2 offensive coordinators, as much money as Chris Ash had in his entire salary pool for offensive coaches when he got hired. That to me is, granted, salaries were up across the board. I get it, across the country. So it's it's apples and oranges. I get it to a degree, but to a certain point, there's also, Rutgers is in the deep end of the pool now. I mean, they have a $1.4 million offensive coordinator. They have a $500,000 receivers coach. The idea that they are not investing in sports is just false. It's over, right? They're pouring money into it. Now the question is, are they spending it well enough to win? That's the question. I mean, there's no more excuses anymore. You can't say, well, underfunded, or no, you don't have the facility, like all this stuff. No, I mean that's the money's there.
I mean, they're still, like, compared to their Big Ten peers. I haven't looked at the whole thing, but Greg Schiano's still one of the lowest paid coaches in the Big Ten, right?
This is true.
Their assistant coaching pool. Shiraka is making, I think he's in the top half of Big Ten coordinators at this point, but by a year or two, is he going to be in the bottom half just because of, like you said, the way salaries are moving? I think Rutgers is at best just keeping up with the Joneses here, because this is the direction that things are headed. I think Dave Brockett $500K might be a bargain, within a year or two when that big TV money explodes. And to your point about the internal debt, I forgot to answer that part of the question. Someone came up to me at the rack the other day, unsolicited, and asked me that same question. And I don't know, this is just pure brain, my meat rack in my brain. I don't think it would be great PR if, the headline, Rutgers forgives millions of dollars in debt to the athletic department. I think the people in the teaching side of things that are already pretty peeved off would not like that. But that's really
all their departments. None of their departments make money either. Like,
yes, but we don't need to get into the debate of spending here, because we could spend a whole podcast. I'm just saying what they would say, right?
They would.
I think it's probably a hurdle that should be overcome, because you got to rip the Band-Aid off. But I'm not in Jonathan Holloway's position, and although he has been very supportive of athletics, but that's just kind of my guess at what is happening. I do think they probably should.
All right. Here's a question from Jeff Steer, directed. It begins, "Hi, Lanny." So I guess this is for you, Pat. "Can Rutgers lacrosse fans expect lacrosse coverage from you this season? Please, pretty please. Are you a lacrosse guy? I don't know who's going to do lacrosse. This is a good question. Fonseca, you've done lacrosse the last couple of years. Are you seeding lacrosse? You can't give up lacrosse."
Lacrosse is all Lanny's.
Wow.
I will do the gracious thing and give up I'll be a very light beat of only covering lacrosse games when they make the Final Four. But that's all Lanny's if he wants it.
Yeah, well, Brian's done after his an 8-hour experience at the Final Four. The rain
what happened again? The rain delay. That's right.
Delay.
That's right. I love that. Holy cow! The text we were getting that day.
I love this, Jeff Steer, because it's hilarious. Lacrosse is the one sport, probably out of every sport, ever in high school sports that I never covered.
That's
So
good.
I don't know where he's getting this from.
Apparently, Jeff has just high hopes for you in lacrosse. And
right.
I understand that. Totally.
I'll get it. Let's get our Fogo face-off, get-off, and we'll move on to the next one.
They're going to the Final Four again. They've figured it out. Lacrosse has cracked the code. They're not quite at the level where you can beat Maryland, which is an absolute juggernaut, but I'm confident in Rutgers lacrosse. How you like that? For what little I know about it, they seem to figure it out. All right, speaking of things we haven't
can't
covered.
Wait to read all the political columns on lacrosse this year. All of them.
I do one a year. I've done like one a year.
Yeah, but Jeff Steer wants them every week, Steve. Come on.
I don't have that.
I need a reaction
he didn't know.
Rutgers.
Excuse me. Jeff Steer did not ask if I was going to write more columns about Rutgers lacrosse. He asked specifically if Pat was going to cover them. That's a different question.
He took that as a given. He said, I know Steve's going to write columns.
Oh,
I
think the lacrosse season opens February 4th, if I'm correct. Right?
Boy.
I better get my preseason coverage ready.
With Final Four expectations, you've got 5 days.
I know.
I need Pat
with the way wrestling's going. With the way wrestling's going, I think it's time to jump ship.
Wow. We were saving wrestling for the very end, but since you brought it up, what is going on? What is going on? What happened?
God.
What is going on with the wrestling team?
Here's the crazy part.
No, really, what's going on? I have no idea.
They're still in the top 25.
No, they're not. How many teams are there? 28?
They're number 23. They may fall out this week, but we give basketball 45 minutes of the podcast, and they're not even ranked. Rutgers wrestling is still ranked.
Do you think Scott Goodell would like us to spend 45 minutes on this podcast about this team right now? Is that what you think?
No, absolutely not.
What's the problem? They lost to Northwestern. I've just Googled it. They lost to Northwestern.
Northwestern is good. They're
no,
good team. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Okay, all right. Save it for the end. I'll tell you about Northwestern.
No, I don't. We're there now. It's too late. I don't want to hear that.
Right.
Just don't crash me with the Northwestern
has
wrestling
been building a senior-laden team for the last 4 years. They won the Midland Championships.
They won the Midland Championships, Brian.
They did.
I had no idea. They did.
They did.
All right.
They're a good team. They have 4 guys that are all Americans on that team, including a national title contender. They're a legit good team. So don't look at the Northwestern one as like this horrible loss. Indiana, horrible loss.
This all comes back to me. This all comes back to me. And this here, you want to hear? Here's my wrestling analysis. This all comes back to me when they have 10 weight classes, and they have their 2 best wrestlers at the same weight. That to me is somebody who didn't. They have a scale in there, right? They have a scale in the building.
They do.
Am I wrong, Brian? You be the tiebreaker. Is that to me seems to be like an epic failure of recruiting. And then one of them are gone. One of them left the program. The one who left the program was the guy who won the position.
Steve,
right?
you're just so off on all of this. You're just can we move on to women's basketball?
No, I got
okay.
What happened?
Okay, the 2 guys at the same weight. You got the 2 best guys in New Jersey the previous 2 seasons, right? It just happens they're at the same weight.
It's
all right,
50 pounds different. It's like 6 pounds.
Penn State.
Someone have a hamburger. Move up a weight.
Penn State, the number 1 team in the country, probably has 6 guys that are the same weight class, and 5 of them won't wrestle. That's just the way it goes. Okay. That's how you build teams and programs. Some of them eventually they'll move weights probably. And the one that did leave, Sammy Alvarez, is not that weight. He was a different weight class.
Okay.
And
so I got that wrong.
And subsequently, the guy that has filled in for Sammy Alvarez has been probably better than Sammy Alvarez was. So
really,
Rutgers actually hasn't really lost anything there. Yeah.
Okay.
Joey Olivieri.
I love to watch Pat just take out the flames that Steve is putting up about wrestling, just putting out fake news in the most confident way possible. It's hilarious.
I mean, holy cow. I just got that completely wrong. Apparently.
This is my favorite segment. It's Steve Googles wrestling 5 seconds before asking Pat about it and then acting like the Shane Sparks on the podcast.
I will say people are angry. I don't know that. I don't know that to be true. Are people angry?
People are very angry and
are they?
They were in the Rutgers wrestling fan group on Facebook. Someone posted the other day, SOS. And it was a thread of 50 comments. How could we lose to Northwestern? This season's such a failure. And to their point, this is probably This is a down year. I will say that it's a down year because they don't have an absolute stud. You don't look at one guy on the team and say, okay, this is Anthony Ashnault or Nick Soriano or Sebastian Rivera the last couple of years. They just don't have a guy of that caliber. They have a lot of guys that are going to be NCAA qualifiers, and they're going to have some guys that are going to be in contention to be All-Americans. And that's the kind of team they have. Just they don't have an absolute hammer, which is a wrestling term. If you don't know what that means.
I got that. Yes.
Hammers in wrestling, pounding nails in basketball. Pat, do you think any of these guys can make a run in March that would kind of salvage the season? Because I reckon a guy making podium could kind of smooth things over.
They have a 7-year streak of having an All-American, which is a top 8 finish at the NCAA championships. And that it's very concerning that streak may come to an end this year. I think they have the potential to have maybe one or two. That would be Brian Soldano at 184. He's a true freshman, which would be incredible. He's one of those guys that you were talking about in the weight mix-up, Steve. And then they have 3 really good guys in the first 3 weights. So I'm 50-50 on whether they're going to have an All-American. We'll see how the second half of the season goes. I
will say this, for the Rutgers fans losing their mind over this, there is nobody in that building. I mean, nobody in that building with more chits in the pot than Scott Goodell. I mean, nobody. Like, he's got more job security than Shiano, than Peichel. I mean, forget it. The dude is bulletproof and should be.
Yeah,
holy
absolutely.
Crap. What he did for that program when there was nobody with an underfunded. Yeah, just
they have the I think the 3rd highest attendance in all of college wrestling at Jersey Mike's Arena, which is incredible.
He created that. Absolutely. Yeah. So he can have a down year or two. And it sounds like
they're still a top 25 program in a down year.
Right. Well,
which is crazy.
The fact that people are upset is a good sign of how high the program has been built. So I guess they can take that as solace.
Especially when we transition to women's basketball, where, hey, they won 3 Big Ten games, and it's like, it's an incredible season, right? I mean, this is a question for the pod. How about a little love for women's basketball? They are not world beaters right now, but it's fair to say they have exceeded expectations, to say the least. I thought if you gave me the over under on 1.5, I was taking the under on how many games they would win. Somebody, and this is not like, I'm not trying to be mean. Someone said to me early on, someone walked on with me and said, you realize that the team only has 8 players. And I'm like, well, what do you mean they only have 8 players? No, they only have 8 players. Well, how is that possible? How do you only have 8 players in the basketball team? They still only have 8 players. And I guess that's just, they've won 3 Big Ten games. They're not in last place in the Big Ten. They're doing okay. So good job by Coquese Washington.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Big Ten is particularly strong this year. They have like 3 top 15 teams. Rutgers got a bit unlucky on C. Vivian Stringer Day. They hosted Ohio State, which is top 5, but they're beating teams that are at their level, which is a good sign, right? That's how you kind of start building a program, is by beating teams that are lateral to you. So yeah, good for Coquese. She is like you said, well exceeding expectations.
That's all I have. Let's see. That's all the questions I have. Let me just glance at the list. We didn't get a lot of questions this week, which is okay. Someone wants to know what's wrong with Caleb McConnell. I don't know that there's anything wrong with Caleb McConnell, Brian.
So what I gather from that question is that people are watching him struggle offensively. He never made the jump offensively that I think a lot of people hoped he would in the offseason, which is fine. I think that if you get the level of defense you get from him on a night in, night out basis, then that his floor is good. I think, honestly, he should just stop taking as many shots as he does. He takes sometimes he'll go for a stretch of 4 or 5 shots in a row. Sometimes they're out of rhythm with the offense. Sometimes it disrupts the flow. I think that, and this is similar to the Cliff thing. Cliff wanted to shoot more mid-range shots, and he did earlier in the season to not great effect. He's 4 of 19 on the year on threes. That's 22%. And in the last 2 games, he's just been doing what he does best, getting deep post position, finishing around the rim, getting to the foul line, blocking shots defensively, getting rebounds. And I think if Caleb kind of takes shots within rhythm and gets to the rim, because he can hit a mid-range shot if he hits it within rhythm, I think that would go a long way in fixing this offense's inefficiency. I think Paul Mulcahy said after the Penn State game, he told me that Cliff, when he does what he does best, when he does those things, doesn't shoot threes, he's dominant, right? So I think that The same could be said for Caleb. And I think Caleb is kind of suffering from his own success because while he's having, he's a top 5 defender in the Big Ten. He's not having as great a year as he did last year. And when you're the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, those are really high expectations. But I do think he is, obviously a great defensive player, a key cog in the best defense in the Big Ten, just not otherworldly like he was a year ago.
Looking at those numbers, and I didn't realize it, 20.6% from 3-point range, which is actually less than Cliff. I get certainly a less number of threes, but yeah, that's 41.4 overall. Yeah, I mean, the numbers aren't great, but he's, the least of things I worry about with that basketball team. He didn't crack the top 10. He'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think when teams lose, people are trying to find any reason to kind of nitpick. I think it's valid. I do think that he should shoot the ball less given those percentages. But I think he more than makes up for it on the other end.
There we go. What do you got, Pat? Before we go,
say we could bring this full circle.
All right.
He just needs to shoot with confidence like Andre Hyatt.
There you go. He just needs to step up, take every shot available. Absolutely. Good job taking a full circle. All right, let's sign up there. I have to make the Eagles interesting. What?
Sorry, really quick. The Madison Square Garden thing on Saturday, the fact that the Big Ten is making Rutgers play there, it's there. The RAC has a lot of people in a tizzy.
What is the reason for that? I don't even know the story there.
Why they're playing at MSG?
Yeah, why is the Big Ten? What is this?
It's part of the Super Saturday deal that they've been doing. Rutgers played there a couple times, Wisconsin, they played Michigan, and they were going to play Michigan State during the 2021 year, and then obviously COVID happened, and that ruined all the scheduling, and this is just a rescheduling of that. So it's just Jim Delaney special, just the Big Ten trying to get more involved in New York, and the Rutgers being New York's team, or at least that's what it advertises to be. That's why they're there.
Right. It's good for recruiting. I just don't see, I get it. You're not playing in the RAC, but you could have a bigger crowd there. It's still closer to home. I guess they think I don't know. I think it's a good thing. I don't see it like being a total bad thing. I get Michigan State's a team you'd rather have at the RAC, I guess, but overall, I don't.
That's the argument. They're upset that the Rutgers is losing a home game, losing the home court advantage. They point out that none of these other teams, Michigan State isn't playing anybody in Detroit. And they're upset about that. And they're saying that Tom Izzo, when he heard he was playing Rutgers at Madison Square Garden and not the RAC, is happy that he doesn't have to deal with that. So I agree with you. I think it's not a bad thing at all. I think it could be really beneficial. Obviously, playing at the RAC is better, gives them a better chance, but this is a unique opportunity, like you said. It's great recruiting. It'll get them some national pub because they're playing on Big Fox. And it's not as great a commute for me, but I just hop on a train and go up. Pat, what do you think? You excited to hit up MSG and watch the Rutgers basketball at the world's most famous arena?
I'm pumped. It's the opposite for me. I got a short commute.
There you go. I won't be there. Have fun. And if they do lose, my advice to you is for someone to stoke the fans' anger, because that's what I would have done. All right, let's sign off there. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back in a couple weeks to talk about that game. All the basketball will be closer to, the NCAA tournament picture in focus. I'm going to study up on wrestling and learn exactly why it's okay to have all your best wrestlers at the same weight, and we'll discuss that as well. So thanks for listening. I'll talk to you then.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.